Welcome to Tail Learn Code. Here there will be tales about software development, learning from each other, code to build solutions. And now your host, Chad Green.
So definitely I want to welcome Cassandra Faris, someone I definitely consider to be a good friend. I've known Cassandra for several years now. It's always a pleasure to have Cassandra at Code PaLOusa or really anywhere I see her at. So welcome, Cassandra.
Hey, glad to be here.
So let's just start off with, just tell us about who you are and what you do.
Who I am and what I do. Well, I'm Cassandra Faris. I am the community manager for an open source based SecOps and DevOps company called SaltStack. So in that role, a lot of what I do is help kind of work between our open source contributor base as well as our enterprise product and try to kind of help those two groups work together to improve our product. So it's a very communication focused job. So it's my day job. In the evening, I am the president of something called STIR Scholarship. STIR Scholarship is a 501c3 nonprofit scholarship program for high school girls who are going to be pursuing software engineering degrees in college. And that's a relatively new program. We started about a year ago, awarded the first set of girls our scholarships back in March, and are gearing up for the 2020-2021 school year. How that scholarship works is we award 3 scholarships every year. Each is $3,000, renewable for all 4 years. So not insignificant. And then the scholarship is funded partially by donations from community members and partially by a lot of companies as well.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm not doing those things, I love to travel. I love to speak at conferences. I've spoken at conferences on 3 continents now, a bunch of states and countries. And then outside of that, I'm into board games. I'm into soccer. I host a Geek Tailgate. And this summer, in the light of COVID, I'm doing a lot of cookouts and hosting virtual meetups and stuff to keep kind of socializing.
I was surprised you didn't mention the corgis.
Oh, the corgis. Well, one is locked. The baby is in his crate, and the adult corgi is pouting back in the hallway. But they can always make an appearance if you want.
Oh no, I mean, because so anyone who follows Cassandra on social media knows how important the corgis are to
The corgi thing cracks me up. I never set out to have the corgis be a part of my identity or my brand, but it just kind of has become a thing that snowballed. When I was creating my brand, I wasn't and corgis.
Right. No. It's again, because I've known you for a while, so I know about the dogs. I've helped you make sure that the dogs can get into hotels.
Yeah.
So hence I know about the dogs. So actually, you've had your fourth curry. You've had it about 2 years now.
Which corgi now?
The first one. I'm sorry, I can't remember the names right now.
Oh no, that's okay. So I had one named Ein. He was named after a dog in an anime. I just realized my headset isn't working. I don't know why.
Yeah, we can say your volume's going really low. And we can barely hear you now. Isn't technology fun?
There. Is that better?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I realized I have this Bluetooth headset that I love, but Bluetooth being Bluetooth, sometimes it acts up.
Hence why I've got the wire.
Yep. All right. So what did everybody not hear?
Oh, so I was just asking, and again, I was saying, I couldn't remember the names, but so I was saying your first corgi, you've had him for about 2 years, I think? Maybe a little bit longer?
So I had a corgi named Ein that I got about 14 years ago. He lived to be about 12 and a half, and as he was getting older, I planned to get a corgi, and so at one point I thought I was going to have Ein, who was a corgi who had degenerative myopathy, which is like Lou Gehrig's disease, and he was actually in a wheelchair. So I was gearing up to have a corgi in a wheelchair and a puppy, and timing worked out such that Katie is my current corgi. She wound up coming into my life after Ein had passed, and then more recently, so Katie is the corgi I've had for 2 years, and then I had always planned to get a second corgi this coming fall. And when COVID hit and we all got stuck at home, I decided to move that timeline up. So I brought home a corgi named Pippin about a month and a half ago now. So he's only 4.5 months. But they're just fun little dogs. They're high energy, keep me entertained.
Yep. I would say it's been fun on social media to see the two dogs mingling with each other, and I like you had a tweet a little bit ago of wait till the smaller one grows up, because the bigger one was definitely bossing around.
Oh yeah, I took a video today again of like the little one was laying down. He can't jump on the couch yet, so the big one was on the couch with a toy, and the little one kept trying to get it, and he couldn't. It's hilarious. It's so funny. It's cool too to I guess I geek out about dogs more than I realize, but it's really cool to train a dog and watch it learn things from you and kind of as you reinforce behaviors. But it's been really cool to see how the current dog is helping me train the puppy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give commands to the dog and the puppy does the same stuff. And so it's a whole other level of it's fascinating how dogs learn, and they learn by a lot of training and positive reinforcement, but also just by example.
Right.
I hadn't realized that about them. So
no, that's really cool. So how has the pandemic been affecting you? How have you been handling up with that?
I'm an extrovert. Extroverts are not meant to be alone for days and days on end. What have I been doing? Thankfully, I have a wonderful partner, and he and I have been quarantining together kind of part-time. I did a lot of Zoom hangouts with my friends, both my tech community friends as well as my soccer friends. Started participating more in some of the other tech community Zooms, like a developer relations meetup that happens every week. So it's been a lot of adapting to how to tap into that extroversion, how to keep my energy level and my happiness level up while also being safe and keeping everybody else safe. More recently, it's been a lot of just very cautious, small groups of people getting together outside. I did a 4th of July cookout with a handful of people, and it was odd. I set up tables in my backyard and put hand sanitizer on tables, and it was very strange. When I put the event, I said if anybody had been sick in the past week and a half, stay home. One of the women works in a hospital and had to go in and was exposed, so she couldn't come. So it's just this whole. It's weird to navigate social situations in light of COVID, but I'm very thankful. I couldn't really see anybody else in person, and I really am missing you and I'm sad we won't be in Louisville together, and I'm not going to be in Louisville or Kansas City or any of these other places I go. I came back from a big conference in January and was all geared up to I was going to help run a conference in the Netherlands for SaltStack, and I was going to go speak in Morocco, and then all of the more regional conferences. And so there was this sad few weeks where I was canceling all my plans on TripIt and trying to find other ways to keep those connections going with people, because that's really where the magic of conferences happens, is that kind of casual chit chat with friends and where you form some really good relationships.
And sure, for those that don't know, I mean, you took a brand new developer relations job right at the beginning of the year, and I only think you were there a month when all of a sudden you had to shut everything down because of COVID.
It wasn't quite that bad, but it was kind of odd. So I took the job right before Thanksgiving.
Okay, all right. I guess I thought you started later than that.
Well, it was right before Thanksgiving, so we had Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then I was gone for 3 weeks for Antarctica. And so it was this strange thing where I accepted my offer with the company. I was super excited to start the job, and I had to say, by the way, I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks for a conference, and it's holiday time. And so it was a little chaotic. And when I took the position, I'd given them an idea of what a realistic time frame is, because in starting a new developer relations job, the first step is, this is not going to be a surprise to you that I'm going to say this, but it's building that network. And that's a 6-month process, and this was a whole new community to me. And so it was cool to see from November to about March, when I really started to form those relationships and started to see people and started to see some changes. But it was it was a learning curve, and there were a lot of interruptions with holidays, the conference, COVID, and then we had a security patch as well at work. And that was an interesting process, because I've been on the receiving end of security patches numerous times, but never on the end that's deploying one, creating the messaging around it, making sure that the patch is installed properly, supporting all the different versions. All that stuff was a whole learning curve for me.
Sure,
So,
sure.
but it's been a really cool job. There was no developer relations when I started at SaltStack,
Hmm.
and they brought me on because where we as an organization screwed up is that as we started to take the open source project and turn it into an enterprise project that we could sell and make profit off of, the community didn't get the love that it really deserved. And the community, the contributors, are who are so important to helping our product be successful. And so I was brought on to help with that, build those relationships, help make sure the community feels heard, create regular touch bases, regular events and things for all of us.
Hmm. No, cool. So, and I'm curious. So you mentioned a developer relations meetup. So I'm kind of curious. How do you do a meetup where you have a whole bunch of people who all have to speak?
It's interesting. um, we're on Zoom. So we use Zoom for it. And I mean, there's like a lot of trying not to talk over each other, but
Right.
everybody gets really excited. Some use of like hand raising or like the chat, but um, at some point you just you get to know the people and their personalities.
Right.
So
Right. I don't remember if you were on there or not, but so during the MVP summit, there's always been the Meta conference meetup, and they did it online this year,
yes.
and that was the whole funny part. There were like 70 people on there, all who run conferences, so all people who are used to speaking up, and I was actually kind of surprised how well that ran. But it was the whole thing. They were they muted everyone. You had to raise your hand, which actually was the right idea, because otherwise we would never hurt anybody on that one.
Yeah, those guys are, Chad and Jeff are just really good at, well, Jeff and Jonathan.
Jeff and John, yeah.
Jeff Strauss and Jonathan Mills are really good at what they do for sure when it comes to running events. And that was the first time, because I'm not a Microsoft MVP, and I know that Meta Conference usually happens at MVP Summit, so this was the first year I could actually participate in it, which was...
I thought you were there, but I couldn't remember.
Yep. That's been the cool thing about things having to go virtual, is that now that events are virtual, we have a chance to have people attending events, attending meetups, attending things that don't necessarily live in big cities or cities. Like I'm in Columbus, Ohio. We have a huge active tech community, but not everybody has that.
Mm-hmm.
And so as much as I love meeting in person, even hopefully things return to normal and we can meet in person again, I'm going to continue doing virtual meetups and these virtual open hours, because I think it's important to make that knowledge accessible to people who can't, be in a city.
Oh yeah, no, I've been saying it for the last couple of months. I've been the part I've been enjoying is that I can go to groups that a couple of weeks ago I was attending a group that's in England, right? I mean, that's something I could just normally go to, but now it's just a matter of it was in the middle of the day, so I kind of had to take away from work for a little bit. But I wanted to hear the speaker, so I did that, right? And it was pretty cool to do that.
Time zones have definitely been a challenge when it comes to planning virtual events for an international group.
Yeah, well, it's funny trying to schedule, right? Because I'm used to scheduling I know enough of the speakers. I know, okay, well, like this person you can't schedule first thing in the morning because they're not a morning person because they probably spent too long. Well, I was gonna say you got the ones who definitely are not a morning person because they spent too much time outside, in the evening prior to. But now I had to be more aware of because I've got two folks still speaking from Turkey. Right, I'm like, I got to make sure that what time zone is Turkey on, and make sure I don't schedule them at 8:00 at night, when they probably want to spend time with the family instead of talk about technology.
One thing I've been doing is for some of our meetup topics, we do about 3 meetups a month at SaltStack that are virtual, and we try to make them a mix of people who work for the company and people who are contributors. But one thing I've been doing is that at least one of the monthly meetup topics is repeated twice.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens once in the morning in the US and once in the evening in the US, and that helps the bulk of our contributors are between California and Eastern Europe. So that's the time zones I'm working with. And so by having those repeat talks, that allows more people to attend the event, and then we record them and put them on YouTube and stream them on Twitch and all that good stuff. But I've had some people just thankful that they could attend the events, not in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that'll be the funny part. In October, I'll be doing a workshop that for me will start at 4 o'clock in the morning. For the people in Europe, it'll be 10 o'clock in the morning. But so yeah, that's the opposite side of the time zone problems. Although it's funny because the organizers were like, well, if you want, we could start it at 11 o'clock. I'm like, well, it's just between 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning to me. It's all the same difference. Might as well start at 10 anyways. But we'll see how well I can do starting at that early morning and going for 8 hours.
Oh yeah, good luck. That'll be tough.
Well, it's just the bad part is it means it's 2 days off of work because of that time difference. I'm gonna have to stop work really early the day before, and obviously when I'm done, I'm not gonna get anything else done because I'm gonna be wiped out. So cool. So I mean, you talk a lot about it, but so obviously you're running meetups and you're communicating with users. But I mean, anything else really interesting about your job that makes it different?
I guess I was both excited and hesitant about joining a startup because you hear a lot of talk about startups can be toxic, they can be very long hours and lead to a lot of burnout. And that was a little bit of a concern for me because I know that I will pour myself into my work and burn myself out if I'm not careful. One cool thing about the culture has been that we worked some long hours. Yeah, we had some, things to get through, but a few weeks ago, the company actually announced a week of mandatory PTO for all of us on the engineering team. And then the following week, everybody in all the other departments got a week of mandatory PTO. We were instructed to stay off Slack, stay off email, and just spend time with family, spend time refreshing, recharging. They wanted us to be, refreshed and ready for the next release cycle. And I've never heard of a startup doing something like that.
No, it is really cool.
The other cool thing is so we do releases every quarter. And for those releases, I, as a community manager, have deliverables as well. So I have things that we announce to our users, we're going to have this stuff in place by the end of the release. And so last release cycle was focused on getting a lot of things in place around making sure people have the information they need, making sure our events were at a regular cadence. And now this quarter, a lot of it's going to be focused on actually having a collaborative. We're going to do a PR merge jam to burn down things in our backlog, but also just kind of improving on those processes and making the communication more effective and helping everybody, again, get the information they need, but also figuring out what can be done less manually because a lot of this stuff is manual now. So it's cool to have every quarter have a new chance to build on what we did before, or if things didn't work out, examine them, iterate on them, and move forward. And I like adding that approach to my work. That's how I've for a long time. So
You made me think of something. Sure enough, I mean, you've kind of built a reputation on communication within software development and such. I mean, and you were talking about your company basically forced you to get off of Slack and all that. What is your advice to folks? Because I mean, sure enough, most developers I know are horrible about getting away from Slack, Teams, whatever the company's using. I mean, what is your advice to folks as far as that, on their, I mean, one thing is when they're, during work, but I mean, on their off time?
I think one of the things I'm thinking about recurring themes and how I unplug. I think the recurring theme is finding activities to do that can't easily be done on my phone or on my computer. So, for instance, playing board games. Well, now we do that we do board games, Dungeons and Dragons, mostly virtually, but like board games, going out for walks, reading. Like when I read on a Kindle that doesn't have a browser or anything that's really effective. So finding ways to almost yourself to unplug seems to work for me because otherwise it's too easy for me to, tab out of a browser and pull up whatever the other distraction is. So that's one way I think I help manage it. And there are times when I did this actually over the weekend. I kind of just unplugged for a few days. Like I took a few pictures and made one post on Instagram, but I mostly just stayed
Mhm.
unplugged. And it's hard to do that because it's this 24-hour cycle and everything's happening. I also know that for me, if I take those breaks every once in a while, that I come back feeling better.
Mhm.
And it can be as simple as blocking time off your calendar, an hour a day of, not having screen time, or an hour a day of eating lunch away from your computer. I'd like schedule me time, schedule unplugged time into your calendar if that, if you're somebody who relies on a calendar, which I know many of us are.
No, that's good advice. I mean, sure enough, I've got one employee. I think next time he takes vacation, which we had to kind of force him to take his vacation. I think next time we're going to actually disable his Teams account because he was responding to Teams messages quicker than we were. We're actually working, right?
They did threaten to do that to us. I mean, not gonna lie, like I checked Slack a couple times, I checked email a couple times last week. I did um, a Twitch with Sam Basu over lunch one day last week, and some Stir Scholarship stuff, but it was much less hectic of a pace than what I'm normally doing.
So going back to the Stir Scholarship, I mean, which that's just awesome that you're doing that. I mean, how hard do you find it to find girls who are interested in studying, computer science or computer science related fields?
Dropping a link in the chat to the Stir Scholarship so people can look at it if they want more
Oh,
information.
yes.
It's not hard to find. I don't want to say it's not hard to find the girls, but the key is to find. The first step is to get into the schools and have contacts with schools. And so that's how we started. Was I don't have children of my own, but the way that we started was reaching out to the schools where some of the other organizers or other tech leaders had kids to kind of say, hey, this is a scholarship program that we're up and running. We had plans to spend a lot of time this spring meeting in person with educators and guidance counselors to review what Stir Scholarship is. And in addition to awarding the scholarship, part of what we want to do is help schools understand how they can encourage girls who are interested in STEM. And so it takes, I think a lot of times it takes teachers and guidance counselors and parents to say, hey, my daughter is interested in this. She should apply for the scholarship. And then, of course, there's a whole marketing component of it. And we've actually brought somebody on to do.
Well, you're fading out, and I'm not sure if it's on your side or my side there.
I heard a lot of feedback.
Well, I have a thunderstorm going over me. Although it's the funniest thing, it's sunny outside, but yet it's thundering outside, which is... So the feedback you heard was a pretty loud thunder, which is why I wasn't sure if it was on my side or your side.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Cool.
So cool.
Yeah, that's the scholarship program.
So I mean, I wonder, are you, especially as I grew up, it wasn't, it was you basically weren't a regular girl if you were interested in technology, right? I mean, is that getting better, or is it? I mean, what do you think about that?
It's getting better, but it's not great. The
Right.
example I always go back to is I remember years ago. So for those who don't know, I started my career as a tech recruiter and got kind of bit by the community organization, tech community bug, and conferences and things through all of that. But I remember early on going to a Java meetup because I was trying to educate myself, and it was like 50 some people at the local Java user group, and I was the only woman in the room. 50 people. And so that was very strange and very much an eye-opening moment. I knew that we had a diversity problem in tech. I didn't quite realize it was that drastic. And so I can't remember the last time I went to an event where I was the only woman, even events that size. There's usually at least a handful of us, so it's getting better, but it's very slow.
Yeah.
It's something that starts, I think optimistically, I like to think that 10 years from now, the face of the tech industry will change a lot, because right now we're at a point where there are more programs like STIR Scholarship that are encouraging high school and middle school girls to get involved in STEM. And 10 years from now, those girls will be graduating college and some of them entering into the software development industry. And so I can see if you can keep girls' attention through high school, they tend to stay interested in STEM subjects, but a lot of times they are either actively or inadvertently discouraged from
Mhm.
those sorts of positions. I mean, that happened to me. When I was in high school, I wanted to go into science, into, some sort of research field. And I was placed in an advanced algebra class my freshman year of high school, and I was having trouble grasping it. And I had asked the teacher to help me out, tutor me during study hall, and she just wouldn't do it. So I, being a somewhat dumb 14-year-old girl, or sensitive 14-year-old girl, I'm not sure what the right wording is, but I basically thought, well, I'm good at languages, I'm good at talking, and so I don't need math,
Mhm.
which, that shuts off a whole bunch of career opportunities. If you
Sure.
don't have a solid math fundamentals, you struggle with science, you struggle with logic, struggle with things like programming. And so that story always comes back to me, that had such an impact on my career path. Like, I never, throughout the whole rest of high school and into college, I never would have pictured myself working in tech in any capacity, because I was so intimidated by anything in the STEM world. Like, it fascinated me, but I thought I wasn't intelligent enough to do it, which I
Mhm.
know is the case. Uh, Over time, I found my niche and I love it, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Right. Well, so I'm curious because there's really two central problems, and I mean problems. I'm stating macro problems. But one is getting girls interested to even study it, right? And obviously there's a second part of the problem. I'm not going to address right now, but is the keeping women in technology, right? Because obviously we have that problem. But let's talk about the first. That's a much bigger problem, I think, than the first problem. I think the first problem is, in my mind, and maybe this is me being naive, I think it's easier to solve that first problem. The second problem, I think the world is trying to solve, but it's slowly, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, as technologists, I mean, because most people who listen to this, are technologists. We're involved in this all the time. I mean, what can we do to improve that first situation, right? The getting girls to be interested, to be willing to study, and so forth.
So I'm a big believer in, anytime you want to make change, you need to focus on, there's a lot out in the world that you can't control when it comes to changing. So you focus on what in your community you can change, and that has that ripple effect. And so if, for instance, you have a daughter or a niece or a friend's daughter or something who's interested in STEM, encourage that stuff. Make yourself an ally for women who are involved in technology. Little things like putting your pronoun in your Twitter bio. It shows that you are, going to be a little bit more friendly and a little bit more open-minded. What else? It's just, I mean, for me, just a big believer in these little changes. So, for instance, I'm very aware of this because my partner's daughter is almost 11 and she's into unicorns and glitter and that sort of stuff, but she's also into robots. She wants to be a robotics
Okay.
engineer. So I'm hyper aware of, when she brings up her aspirations to be a robotics engineer or express her interest in anything engineering related, I'm hyper aware of making sure she knows that that's perfectly acceptable to do that, even if you're wearing a pink dress while you do it.
Mhm.
Um, so a lot of that, I mean, definitely educating yourself on resources that are available for girls who are in STEM, and just like you do with anything else, just foster that interest.
No, it's so as you know, I help with the tech ladies here in Louisville,
Mhm.
and this was about 2 years ago. We had a group from one of the girls' schools who was doing a robotics team, and they came to our group and spoke and showed off their robot they've been working on. It was just so neat to see that, right? And but they were as girly as could be, right, at the same time, right? Which also good to see that you don't have to lose that. Well, then, I mean, again, having a girly image is not important, also, but it's also important to know that you can still be a girly girl and still enjoy technology and such.
Yeah. Oh, that's a whole thing. I've had lots of conversations about this, how I, as a speaker, when I started out, I thought I had to dress like a developer, whatever that means. And to me, that meant jeans, t-shirt, flip-flops, glasses, all things I wear regularly, but I also am definitely a dress girl. And I remember the first time that pr- I, I got comfortable enough that I felt like I didn't always have to wear like the nerdy t-shirt and jeans. And so I presented in a subdued dress. I think it was like a navy blue dress. It was very subdued. But um, after I presented in a dress, a woman came up to me and she said, it's so good to see a woman who is, feels comfortable in her fashion and her self-expression in this world where you look different. And so since then, like I'm in really bright stuff all the time now.
Yeah.
It's kind of become a signature of mine. But it's neat because more often than not, after I give a presentation or a talk in something that's more stereotypically feminine or colorful, or I roll in with my like Unikitty keychain on my backpack or whatever stuff I do. Every time I do that, people will say, "Well, thank you. You gave me representation." Actually, one of your speakers at Code PaLOusa last year, she was presenting she presented in a little sundress, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I love your dress." And she said, "Thank you. You helped me feel like I didn't always have to dress in the jeans and, conference t-shirt." So that's, a little thing. It's a messaging thing. People want to see people that look like them.
Yeah.
And so I obviously don't speak for or look like all women, but for women who want to look and act and dress a certain way, hopefully it makes a few of them more comfortable.
No, that's it's really cool to hear. Of course, on the flip side, talking about, steering girls to technology and everything. I think one thing is sometimes I see people missing this when they're really heavy into it. It's insisting that every girl should be pushed into technology, and I always use my daughter as an example, right? And I tried to get her experience with it, and she wanted nothing to do with it, right? And so I learned pretty early on with her, it's not what she wants to do. And she's a true girly girl, right? By every definition of it. So I always give that advice to folks. It's definitely make sure you push them to see if that's what they're going to enjoy. But if it's not for them, it's not for help them find what is right for them. That goes. That's not just for girls. That's for boys. It's for people of color. It's really whatever it is. I really find the importance of making sure we help the youth find what they're going to enjoy doing.
Yeah. Everybody doesn't need to be in STEM. And I do have to say I appreciate people like you and several others who are cishet white men who are supporting Louisville Tech ladies and who are being allies and advocates for those of us who are underrepresented in tech. We need those allies. And so I do appreciate that about you quite a bit.
Well, thank you. I've always said, I've joked about this, and I've said it in front of large crowds. We can't all be white guys in our mid 40s, right? It's just not going to work, right? We're not developing good software doing that. We're because we're not thinking of all the aspects of things. And sure enough, I think honestly, I find teams of diversity be more fun to be on, right? And now, granted, unfortunately, it's very few teams I've been on that have been full of diversity. I tried my best to improve that, but it does. Sure enough. And I'm not saying anything against the team I've got right now, but it's less diverse than like the team I was on before, and it was really great, right? It was a lot of fun, and granted, the team I'm on right now is also a lot of fun. So I don't want anyone on my team thinking, "Oh, I don't like this team." It's just we're a smaller team, and it just happens to be we're defined as we are right now. But awesome. So no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I do like the different perspectives. So my current team, there's about 50 engineers in the company, about 10 to 12 of us on my team, which is the core development team. And among us, we have people from, I think, 5 different countries represented on the team. People who, and I have coworkers in Portugal, Russia, the Netherlands, Germany, Argentina, all over the place. And I love being on that team because people bring different perspectives to the table. And there's tons and tons of research on how diverse teams are more effective at problem solving than teams where everybody looks, acts, and thinks the same.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. So you talked about it for a moment. So how did so you talked about your recruiter, but let's talk more about how did you get your career going? Because you definitely had a longer path than I think some have.
I dropped out of law school and sold insurance for a few years while I got my MBA at night. And in my MBA program, my favorite classes were HR and marketing. And so when I moved to Columbus, where I live now, I decided to kind of make a career switch. And I was just like on Craigslist and stuff looking at job openings. And I kept seeing jobs for recruiters. And specifically, I saw jobs for bilingual recruiters. So I'm English Spanish bilingual. And I applied for that recruiting position, and I realized that recruiting marries some of the things I really like about marketing, in that you're promoting a company, you're kind of getting people to come to events, you're advertising things, and HR as far as the career development piece goes. So worked in warehouse recruiting for a couple years and then switched to tech recruiting. And during my tech recruiting journey early on, everybody's heard the story. Anybody who's talked to me has heard the story 100 times, but early on, I was given the advice, don't be the dumb recruiter who doesn't realize that Java and JavaScript are different things. So I made it a point to start educating myself. And at the time, cloud computing was new. So I got involved with the cloud computing community, helped organize a conference, and then over time, got hired by a consulting company that wanted me to recruit for them, but also that understood how community works and wanted me to help run their community events. So I had this hybrid community management or community outreach and talent management role. And over time, I realized that my real passion as a recruiter wasn't finding people jobs. It wasn't closing the deal. It wasn't fulfilling the opening. It was watching people grow and seeing somebody who I hired as a newbie developer. Now, what are they doing a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later? And that became really rewarding. So I started finding ways to share that information with the tech community, partially as a way to give back, partially as a way to help kind of expand the knowledge that I had and help more people be fulfilled in their careers. And then I eventually learned that developer relations was an actual job, and that community management is a niche in developer relations that doesn't require you necessarily to be a programmer. I took some programming classes. I don't mind doing it. It's just not my favorite thing. Like, I did a brief stint as a product owner, and that was great for me, like business analysis type work where I'm going between the tech and the business. So I learned about community management as a job, went on a job search, put out on Twitter that I was looking, did a dozen interviews a week for 3 weeks, and got a new job that's been really, really awesome. Yeah. And thank you. Yeah. Well, you were in my career, that career path workshop that I've done. And the takeaway of all of that long story is that really you need to, I'd say at least every year, sit down and think about your career, what it is that you like, what it is you would like to be doing more of, what it is you would like to be doing less of, and find ways to do that in your job. But you need to sit back and think about where your career is going instead of getting on this autopilot. Uh-oh, Sean says no audio.
Yeah, that was for me. I was typing something real quick, and my keyboard's really loud, so I muted. You're hearing me through a different mic, so everyone, okay. You heard me just fine. It was the stream couldn't hear me. I sometimes forget to unmute myself when I mute myself.
I mean, I accidentally unmuted myself last week and scolded my manager.
Well, there you go.
I put it on Twitter. I was actually back to the burnout thing. I like to work on my back patio when the weather is nice. So I was out there and we had an all hands meeting, and we were doing like release playback stuff, and my dogs were eating hostas. And I told the dogs, knock it off. And just as I say knock it off, my manager, Mo, who's just amazing, he had just stopped talking. And I didn't realize I was unmuted. So I'm like, what is everybody laughing at? And then Mo's like, well, to be fair, I sometimes do need to be told to knock it off. I was like, I'm so sorry. So, pro tip on Zoom, there's a setting that if you hold the spacebar down for too long, it unmutes your microphone. I have now disabled that setting.
Ah,
But yeah, I yelled at my manager.
yeah. I'm usually trying to figure out which thing, So I've got a soundboard right here, so I can mute it there. But in the different apps, and I'll mute it there, and I forget where I muted myself. Or like I said, I just forget that I muted myself and I keep on talking. So yeah, it's the fun of it's the fun of quarantine work, right? Because we're learning more about how to work these things better. But oh, there we go. There's of course the dog had to get on screen.
She saw me on the camera and was like, "All right, I need to be on screen." So this is Katie Corgi.
I see Katie was getting jealous of you being on the screen.
Oh yeah. She for a while thought she had to sit on my lap, so I would log into my stand up and she'd hear me say good morning and think she needed to jump in my lap.
Mm-hmm.
Then she's doing that, but now every once in a while she'll still come jump in my lap when she hears me on meetings.
I guess I say luckily, when I'm in my desk chair, my dog does not sit on my lap. Now, when I'm on the couch, he loves, when I'm trying to relax, that's when he decides it's time to jump in Daddy's lap and literally, I mean, jump in Daddy's lap and move around and he's 50 pounds, so he's not that light, Mm-hmm. But the dogs are awesome. I love having the dog around.
Yeah, the dog helped me get through quarantine because we were not allowed to really leave our houses or go in public. But Governor DeWine said that we could go out for exercise outside.
Sure. And
so every day I would take the dog out for a walk, and I'd change my Slack status to taking my government-approved walk, and I would take the dog and walk for an hour around my neighborhood. So I did it a lot of days. Taking my government-approved walk. It's good stress relief, too, just getting outside.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. All right, let's divert for a minute. Let's talk about your Code PaLOusa presentation. And I picked this one for a very particular purpose, right? So, business to tech, a communication guide, right? And I picked this because, this is the problem we have in technology, right? It's just how hard it is for business and technology to talk to each other, and really on both sides, in my mind, right? But what is the key takeaway out of this presentation?
So when I first started to write this talk, I was thinking about it from the perspective of I worked for a consulting company, and so we were always dealing with these competing goals and wants and desires of the client with demanding deadlines and, scope creep and everything, and then the developers wanting to deliver the product well, but also want to learn things. And so the talk was going to be about how to get, those two groups on the same page, and was definitely going to have an approach of DISC assessment for those who are familiar. It deals with communication styles. It will touch on some of that. But the whole thesis of that was that basically in order for business and tech to collaborate together, you need to find the shared goals and the shared language. Because yes, you might get annoyed that the client wants this. And yes, the client might get annoyed that the developers can't build everything they want. So you need to figure out what the shared goals are, what the shared problems are you're trying to solve, and work together. More recently, that's been interesting working in a company where I kind of straddle between open source and enterprise. And there can be some tension and kind of the conflicting priorities. And so a lot of what I've been doing is trying to find ways to help people feel heard, help find ways that we can collaborate, and reiterate that we are working toward the same goal. We are working toward making software more secure. We are working toward making it easier to automate processes. And so that's, I think, what it's going to be a lot about is just getting people on the same page. We're not the enemy. We might have different priorities, but we're trying to solve the same problem.
Mm-hmm. In your experience, what side is worse? Business talking to technology or technology talking to business?
Okay, so I am definitely a pro-tech team bias, which is interesting because I was on the leadership team of a consulting company for 5 years. But I feel like for example, I always got annoyed as a recruiter when people would say they needed resources for a project. To me, that dehumanizes people.
Sure.
But I think that the problem is that business a lot of times expects programmers to be these coder robots, and you're these magical coder robots, and you can build anything you want, and you can build anything you want in 2 hours for $20, right? Like there's these really unrealistic expectations because business doesn't understand all the intricacies and everything that goes behind the technology getting built. And so I think that I think business has a harder time understanding tech. Well, and for tech people to understand something, a lot of it is just giving them a why. Like I found that dev teams, I found that my contributors, I found that my consultants are a lot more willing to do the thing that they might not agree with, or they might not understand, or they might think is silly if we explain why it is that we want you to do that. Because we're logical problem solvers, right? We want to know the reasonings before we do things. And so I think it's easier to explain the why to a developer than it is to help a business understand everything that goes into building software.
No, admittedly, in my mind, that question was kind of a trick question because I think it's
Really
I think both sides are just as bad, right? It's especially I found this as I've grown in positions, I kind of cringe on both sides with with the way how they react to each other, but I never thought of it that way. The developers want to know the why, right? And I might think about some things a little bit differently in the future because that's generally what it is. Because generally as a developer, we are very logical thinking. Right? That's why we're developing software, right? It's really if you don't think logically, then you're not going to be a very good developer. So definitely brings an interesting aspect to that.
Yeah, I had a great manager at the consulting company. It was called Improving that I worked at, and he had given me that. We were having trouble with the consultants understanding something. He's like, you know what? I remembered some advice I was given early on in my career, and it's that developers want to know the why. And so we started explaining why it was important to them. In this case, it was logging their community involvement activities. When we had a reason for why they should log those activities, they were more likely to do those.
Yeah. And of course, I do find the bigger the company, the less likely the developers are gonna hear the why.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because I know. Again, now thinking back, my time at HP, and there were a lot of times there were a lot of times even me, I had to just tell people, well, it just is what it is. Just do it. That's what the company wants, right? Because either I didn't know because I was just handed down orders, or I knew, but it was one of those. Actually, unfortunately, there were times where I didn't want maybe my developers to know why. Why do I do this? Well, I know why, but I don't really want you to know why, because then you're just gonna be more upset with me.
Yeah, that's fair. There are times when it's not appropriate to share for whatever reason. There are things that can't be shared too, maybe with open source contributors because of NDA concerns, right?
Sure.
So there's a lot of, it's definitely not black and white when it comes to communication.
Sure. Really quick, I want to going back to your career path. So you were a recruiter for a while, and of course, recruiters, and sometimes rightfully so, but generally not. They're not very well revered in technology. Again, I probably have a little bit different aspect because I work with so many, and obviously running community groups. I'm dependent on recruiters, but what's your advice more towards those in tech? What's your advice as far as working with recruiters and finding the ones that they're really because again, there's no question there are recruiters that are there just simply to get a paycheck, but there are plenty who actually care. What's your advice to find those ones who actually care and will do you right?
The recruiters who go to events are probably, especially if they're at meetups and things, or if they're at conferences and not, their meetups, conferences, stuff like that, they're somewhat engaged. And I would say meetups even more so, because recruiters go to conferences because their company's sponsoring and they need to work the booth.
Right.
Not always, but that's pretty common. So that's one indicator. Interview your recruiter. Anytime you're interviewing for a job or for a recruiter, interview your recruiter. And I would say ask the recruiter questions like, how do you educate yourself on technology, or how are you involved in the tech community? And those answers can be very revealing. And I think that the best recruiters I've seen are the ones who are more involved in the community and who are actually out there attending the meetups and who have an interest in the technology. Not maybe necessarily something that's appropriate to ask your recruiter, but for some people, the recruiting career path is an entryway into sales. And in my experience, the recruiters who are in recruiting as a stepping stone to sales tend to be less engaged than those who are in recruiting as a stepping stone, maybe HR or coaching or some other sort of role, I guess, that's not so transactional.
No, and sure. The one, well, I mean, one, there's just people who are just crappy at their job anyways, but the ones I generally don't like are the ones, it's their stepping stone, right? They want to become those account managers, those executive account managers, and that's their whole goal in life. I mean, I'm definitely not saying anything bad about recruiting account managers. They're so, kind of fun is some of my best friends are account managers, right?
I was a sales and account manager.
And I mean in reality, right? I mean, there are some who I cherish greatly because I've gotten to know them, right? But you see plenty, like you said, there are plenty who are the recruiting is their mandatory step to get into that role. I think it is good advice. It's so the last question I'll have for you. As you know, one of the hardest things about running a conference is finding the underrepresented to get out and speak. And I deal with this every year, and I try my best. But what is your advice to underrepresented to get into speaking? Right? I mean, what should they be doing to try to do that?
So I'm a retired conference organizer, as you know. I quit doing. I couldn't do both conference organizing and STIR scholarship at the time, but
Sure.
now I might be getting involved in another conference that I might help organize that's in early stages. So stay tuned for that. But I think that a lot of it is, I can speak to this better from an organizer perspective, and I speak to it from both perspectives. So I, as a speaker, how I found opportunities, I am fortunate in that I'm extroverted. I'm not shy. I am not afraid to go up to people and talk to them. And so I was always, willing to talk to people at meetups and user groups and stuff and listen to their ideas, listen to their questions, and eventually started getting invited to speak on panels and things, I think, just from putting myself out there and building a reputation as the recruiter who got tech. So it was building a network was part of it, was just kind of finding who are the organizers, getting to know them, finding out about events, just applying to them. It also helps to have mentors, and anytime somebody who's underrepresented, so not just women, but people of color and a lot of other members of the LGBTQ plus population, anytime somebody in one of those underrepresented groups tells me that they want to start getting involved in speaking, I'll volunteer to look over abstracts, send them resources to calls for speakers, just again, because I can't fix the whole industry. What can I do in my area of control and in my community? So that's a big thing. From an organizer perspective, one way that I've had really good success is I've kept a list of good speakers who maybe I've seen them at a conference, maybe I've just followed their material on Twitter, but speakers who are good and underrepresented. And when I would open my calls for speakers, I would put out the general calls and everything, but for some of those underrepresented people, I would reach out one by one through an email or a direct message or something and say, hey, I've been following this for a while, or I saw you speak at this event. We'd love to have you submit a talk. And the year I did that, the first year that I did that, Dog Food Con, I got a lot of thank yous. And a lot of people that said they wouldn't have known about the conference otherwise, and conference attendees who were thanking me because there were speakers who looked and talked and acted like them. But it's a lot of work, right? It's real easy to just put out a blast that you're looking for speakers. It's a lot harder to keep a list of people and reach out to them one by one. And it's not a long, complicated message. It's somewhat of a template where I fill in, the topics, but just those individual reach outs help you feel like it's more accessible to be a speaker.
No, that's good. But I mean, sure enough, me thinking through this, I mean, how do you do that? And, and I guess the question is, how do you do that and being genuine, right? So, I mean, again, I think one of the hard parts about running a conference is finding underrepresented and reaching out to underrepresented, not because I want to fill a quota, right? Well, admittedly, I mean, again, I'll be quite honest. Part of it is because I'm trying to make sure we look good, right? That we have a good representation. Because luckily, I don't get as much as I used to. But I mean, our first couple of years, Code PaLOUsa, we were getting torn apart. You don't have enough women speakers, and it was hard because, like, I remember, I think it was our second year, and we tweeted out, okay, here's our speaker lineup and everything. And it wasn't 15 minutes later, I got an email, or I got a tweet, response of, you don't have enough women speakers. And I remember it bothered me. And I look back, and of course now we've always done blind reviews. At least in my mind, that helps me, because I don't have that cognitive bias as to, in my review team, more importantly, doesn't have a cognitive bias as we're reviewing abstracts. We're just seeing speaker A, speaker B, speakers, so forth, right? But and I remember looking back, and sure enough, it turned out even with a blind review, we actually picked 100% of the women that submitted, and but it turned out it was only, I forget the exact number, but like 6 out of like 40 speakers. Yeah. So it's interesting. I might plug in later just in how do I do how do I reach out to and again, not just women, but everyone, and again, make sure it is as genuine as I do mean it, right? Because I can also see it because I've heard it, right? I know of one in particular mine. I won't mention her name, but who's mentioned to me, she's like, well, sometimes I feel like conferences reach out to me just because they want to fill a quota, right? And this is someone, I mean, if I told you who it was, I mean, someone you would definitely know, and someone who's, very adamant about getting more women in technology and that type of stuff. But I don't know. I don't expect an answer from right now. As you said, it's just what came in my mind is that I mean, that's the flip side, hard part of it. Again, especially as a guy in technology running a conference.
It's hard too because it's a smaller subset, right? Like, there's a very small minority of people in tech who are speakers and a small minority that are women, and so you're drawing from 2 already small pools, which also doesn't help find the speakers. It requires a lot of effort and a lot of work, and it's, again, something that's going to change over time, I think.
Yeah. Although sure not, I mean, I'm just thinking about, again, for me and my conferences, the interesting part is so the quote unquote executive committee there's only 3 of us on there, and I'm actually the only guy.
Nice.
And it just happened to be. It was never a purpose, right? And, never was, okay, well, I want to make sure I have a bunch of women or anything. It's just the way how it's turned out to be. So sure enough, I mean, me thinking about it, I could probably encourage them to send those kind of messages, because that way I think it would come out better. But oh, great. Well, now that's Chad's self-help on how to run his conference. Yeah. But I think that helps others, right? As listening in, because I mean it's not easy, right? It is hard to find it. I am happy this year because we do have more diversity. I don't know if more in the other years, but we have women, we have people of color, we have women of color. Well, one woman of color, which actually I'm really excited for her. We did the Global Diversity CFP Day, and sure enough, I mean, I found about pretty late, but so I arranged it here in Louisville, and so the woman of color that I have speaking, I actually helped her during the Global CFP Day, and so it's so exciting to see that she did submit, and that so she'll be speaking. So we're looking forward to that. Well, Cassandra, it's been a blast talking to you, as it always is. I mean, you're one of the people I love hanging out with at conferences and such. As does everyone. Everyone loves hanging out with Cassandra. It's
you can make me blush.
Well, you're usually are the center of the circle. I think, not the center, but one of the people in the center of the circle. I always find
I can be a ringleader.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go do a thing.
It's an extrovert in you, right? I mean, just thinking about it, it's because you're an extrovert, and the rest of us, most of us, are introverts. So we love having that person who kind of, here, let's go do this. All right, I think that helps.
Yeah, it's also a matter of knowing. Generally, at an event, they don't want to eat alone. They don't want whatever, and so I'm just the person who will put out, hey, like, who wants to meet up for lunch, or see somebody sitting by themselves and go sit by them. But yeah, that's just how I'm wired. But I found that when somebody takes the initiative to say, hey, let's do a thing, people are generally on board with that thing.
Oh, awesome. Well, like I say, I really appreciate you joining me. Sorry for all the technical difficulties we were dealing with. Just one of those evenings, right? So, and everyone out on Twitch, thank you for joining us. I really do appreciate it. Code Sean, sorry I didn't really get to your comments, but I really just flowed in with the conversations we were going. Well, Code with Sean is always on my Twitch. That's the one I know well.
Yeah. I always talk about this stuff afterwards. Like, reach out to me. Twitter is my preferred means of contact, but I will gladly talk about these things more.
And sure enough, I mean, we won't go into it, but if you're ever curious, ask Cassandra about how she found a job on Twitter.
That's true.
And you did a talk about it, and you couldn't talk about the fact you landed the job on Twitter, which was funny. And of course, I was at Code PaLOusa, that's why I know about it.
Yep. And I tell other people how they can find a job using, social media, their personal brand.
Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate it, and like I say, if I don't see you until then, I look forward to seeing you at Code PaLOusa.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.